The Boy and the Airport's Edge. The midday sun blazed relentlessly over the small town, its heat shimmering off the asphalt roads and corrugated metal roofs. Near the edge of Teterboro Airport, where the town met the bustling world of jet-setters and cargo movers, 14-year-old Liam Ross leaned against a sagging chain-link fence. His lanky frame was slightly bent, one foot propped against the wire mesh. In his hand, he gripped a long wooden stick, poking idly at a stray soda can lodged in the dirt. The rhythmic clang it made against the gravel was the only sound accompanying the hum of jet engines in the distance. The airport was both a source of wonder and irritation for Liam. He'd lived his whole life in the shadow of its activity, watching sleek private jets take off into the endless blue sky, while his own life seemed permanently grounded. His mother worked double shifts cleaning offices, yet they still struggled to make ends meet. Liam helped out by scavenging cans and bottles around the airport, trading them in for a meager handful of coins. The routine had become second nature to him. Walk the perimeter, dig through trash, avoid the suspicious eyes of airport guards, and keep an ear out for trouble. Most days, it was monotonous but harmless work. Today, however, something felt off. Liam looked out across the airfield, his gaze narrowing at the activity around one of the private hangars. Workers bustled about as usual, checking equipment, refueling jets, and inspecting tires. But there was a strange tension in the air, something he couldn't quite place. "Get your head out of the clouds, Ross," he muttered to himself, shaking the feeling off. He hefted his canvas bag over his shoulder, the cans inside clinking together like cheap wind chimes. Liam was about to turn away when movement near the hangar caught his eye. A man in dark clothing, hood pulled low over his face, was crouched next to the landing gear of a gleaming white jet. At first glance, it looked like he might be part of the maintenance crew, but something about him didn't sit right with Liam. The man wasn't wearing a uniform, and he kept glancing around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Liam froze, his grip tightening on the bag strap. The man reached into a small satchel at his side and pulled out what looked like tools: a screwdriver, some pliers, and a metallic cylinder Liam didn't recognize. "What the?" Liam whispered. The man worked quickly, removing a panel from the underside of the jet. Liam's stomach churned as he watched the man fiddle with the exposed machinery. He wasn't an expert on planes, but he knew enough to recognize sabotage when he saw it. His mind raced. He had to tell someone. But who would believe him? The airport guards barely tolerated his presence as it was. They'd probably think he was trying to cause trouble or looking for an excuse to stay near the jets. Still, Liam couldn't just walk away. Dropping his bag with a dull thud, he sprinted toward the nearest airport building. His sneakers slapped against the pavement as he approached the side entrance, where a guard stood with his arms crossed, a bored expression on his face. "Hey," Liam called, waving his arms to get the guard's attention. The man, a burly figure with a graying beard, looked down at Liam with a mix of irritation and skepticism. "What do you want, kid? You're not supposed to be here." "There's a guy near the private jet hangar," Liam said, breathless. "He's messing with one of the planes, doing something to the landing gear. I think he's trying to sabotage it." The guard raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking toward the hangars before returning to Liam. "You're imagining things. Go home, kid. This is no place for you." "I'm not lying," Liam insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "I saw him. He was taking apart part of the plane's gear." The guard sighed heavily, clearly unimpressed. "Look, I don't have time for this. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the cops." Liam felt a wave of frustration and helplessness wash over him. He turned to look back toward the hangar, but the man in the hoodie was gone. "Fine," Liam muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. He stormed off, his heart pounding in anger and fear. But as he made his way back to the edge of the airfield, the image of the man's tools and the open jet panel replayed in his mind like a warning. Something bad was going to happen if no one acted, and he couldn't let that happen. Determined, Liam decided he had to try again. This time, he wouldn't bother with the guards or the workers. He'd go straight to the source, the jet owner. Liam scanned the area, looking for any sign of who might own the jet. A sleek black car parked nearby caught his attention. Standing next to it was a tall man in a sharp suit, talking to a well-dressed woman who appeared to be his assistant. Liam recognized him immediately. It was Darren Stokes, a billionaire tech mogul whose face frequently appeared on magazine covers and television interviews. "Perfect," Liam muttered, swallowing the lump of nerves that formed in his throat. With no time to waste, he darted toward the car, ignoring the confused glances of nearby workers. As he approached, the assistant stepped forward, blocking his path. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. "I need to talk to Mr. Stokes," Liam said, his voice urgent. "It's about his jet. It's not safe." The assistant frowned, clearly skeptical. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Stokes is very busy." "Please," Liam interrupted, stepping around her to address the billionaire directly. "Sir, your jet's been sabotaged. Someone tampered with the landing gear. You can't take off." Darren Stokes turned to face Liam, his piercing blue eyes narrowing. For a moment, he said nothing, studying the boy with an unreadable expression. "What's your name, kid?" Stokes finally asked, his voice calm but commanding. "Liam Ross," he replied, his breath still coming in short gasps. "And how do you know my jet's been sabotaged?" Liam hesitated. I saw a guy near the hangar, messing with the landing gear. He wasn't wearing a uniform, and he looked like he didn't want anyone to see him. I told the guards, but they wouldn't listen." Stokes raised an eyebrow, glancing at his assistant before looking back at Liam. "That's a serious accusation." "I know," Liam said, his voice steady, "but I'm telling the truth. Please, you have to check it out before it's too late." For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a nod, Stokes turned to his assistant. "Get security to inspect the jet. Now." As the workers and guards gathered around the jet to investigate, Liam stood off to the side, his heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just put himself in a lot of trouble if he was wrong. But when one of the workers shouted something unintelligible, followed by the sound of frantic voices, he knew he wasn't. The man in the hoodie had vanished, but the evidence of his sabotage was clear. And for Liam, it was the beginning of a series of events that would change his life forever. A hero's unwelcome. The chaotic hum of voices carried through the air as airport workers, security personnel, and Darren Stokes crowded around the gleaming jet. Liam stood back, a mix of apprehension and relief swirling in his chest. He had done the right thing, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. What if they didn't find enough evidence to stop the flight? What if Stokes and his entourage dismissed his warning as a baseless claim? Liam watched intently as the security chief, a broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, approached the workers inspecting the jet. The chief spoke in low tones, and Liam couldn't make out the words, but the workers' faces shifted from annoyance to alarm. One of them pulled out a small metal cylinder that had been wedged into the landing gear's hydraulics. "It's a bypass valve plug," the worker shouted, holding it up for the group to see. "If we'd taken off, this would have disabled the landing gear entirely. We wouldn't have been able to land without a crash." Liam exhaled sharply, his knees nearly giving out from the sheer relief that swept over him. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't wrong. His warning had mattered. Nearby, Darren Stokes crossed his arms, his piercing gaze locked onto the device. "How the hell did this happen?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with steel. The security chief snapped his fingers, summoning 2 guards. "Sweep the area," he barked. "Whoever did this might still be nearby." As the guards hurried off, Liam stepped closer, his voice breaking the tense silence. "I saw him," he said, his words tentative at first, but gaining confidence. "The guy who did it. He was wearing dark clothes and a hoodie. He had a bag of tools, and he slipped away right after I spotted him. Stokes turned his head sharply, his intense eyes pinning Liam in place. You saw him. Why didn't you stop him? Liam's face flushed. I didn't know what to do. I tried to tell one of the guards, but he didn't believe me. That's why I came to you. The assistant, standing nearby with a tablet clutched to her chest, frowned. How do we know he's telling the truth? This could just be a lucky guess, or worse, a setup. Liam's stomach dropped at her words. I swear, I'm not lying, he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. I don't want anything from you. I just didn't want anyone to get hurt. Stokes studied Liam in silence, his face an unreadable mask. Then he glanced at the assistant. Enough. The fact is, he came forward, and it might have saved our lives. We'll get to the bottom of this later. The billionaire's words felt like a lifeline, and Liam clung to them. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. As the investigation around the jet continued, Liam slipped away from the commotion. He'd done his part. Now it was time to head home before the guards or airport workers decided he was more trouble than he was worth. He grabbed his canvas bag, the clinking cans inside a sharp contrast to the heavy silence in his chest. The walk home felt longer than usual. The late afternoon sun bore down mercilessly, and the weight of the bag pulled at his shoulder. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, relief, pride, and a nagging sense of unease. What if the saboteur came back? What if they targeted him for getting involved? By the time Liam reached the cracked pavement of his apartment complex, his legs ached, and his shirt was damp with sweat. He trudged up the stairs to the third floor, where his mother's small apartment awaited. When he opened the door, the scent of cleaning products mixed with the faint aroma of instant noodles greeted him. His mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers pressed against her temples as she stared at a stack of bills. Hey, Mom, Liam said softly, setting the bag of cans by the door. His mother looked up, her eyes tired but warm. Hey, sweetheart. How was your day? Liam hesitated, unsure how much to tell her. Eventful, he said finally. I saw something at the airport. Something bad. Her brows knitted together. What do you mean? Are you okay? I'm fine, Liam said quickly. But there was this guy messing with one of the jets, and I told someone about it. They found out he was trying to sabotage it. His mother's face paled. Sabotage? Liam, that sounds dangerous. Did anyone see you? I don't think so, he lied, not wanting to worry her. I just did what I thought was right. She stood and walked over to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. You're a brave kid, you know that. But you've got to be careful. The world isn't always kind to people who try to do the right thing. Liam nodded, the weight of her words settling in his chest. I know, Mom. The next morning, Liam woke to the sound of voices outside the apartment door. He rubbed his eyes, the sunlight streaming through the thin curtains making him squint. The voices grew louder, one of them distinctly unfamiliar. Mrs. Ross, is this the right apartment? A deep, authoritative voice said. Liam's heart skipped a beat. He threw off his blanket and hurried to the door, where his mother was already opening it. Standing in the hallway was Darren Stokes, flanked by two sharply dressed bodyguards. The billionaire's presence seemed to fill the small space, his imposing figure radiating confidence. Can I help you? Mrs. Ross asked, her tone cautious. Stokes smiled politely. Mrs. Ross, I'm Darren Stokes. Your son saved my life yesterday. Liam stepped forward, his mouth hanging open. Mr. Stokes. The billionaire's gaze softened as he looked at Liam. Hello again, Liam. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did. If you hadn't spoken up, my jet would have taken off. And who knows what could have happened. Mrs. Ross looked between her son and the man in the doorway, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. What is he talking about, Liam? Liam swallowed hard. I told you, Mom. I saw someone messing with the jet, and I told them about it. I didn't think it'd be a big deal." Stokes chuckled, his voice rich and warm. "It was a very big deal. And I don't think you realize just how much courage it took to speak up. That's why I'm here." He gestured to one of the bodyguards, who stepped forward holding a sleek black briefcase. "What's this?" Mrs. Ross asked, her eyes widening. Stokes opened the briefcase, revealing neatly stacked bundles of cash. "A token of my gratitude," he said, "for your bravery, Liam, and to help your family out of whatever struggles you might be facing." Liam and his mother stared at the money in stunned silence. The weight of their financial burden suddenly felt lighter, as if lifted by an invisible hand. "But we can't accept this," Mrs. Ross said, her voice trembling. "It's too much." "Nonsense," Stokes replied firmly. "It's the least I can do." "And Liam," he looked at the boy with genuine admiration, "if you're ever in need of guidance or opportunity, you've got my card. I see potential in you. Don't waste it." He handed Liam a sleek business card with his name and contact information embossed in gold. Liam's fingers closed around it, the realization dawning on him that his life had just changed in ways he never could have imagined. As Stokes and his entourage left, Mrs. Ross sank into a chair, her hands shaking as she looked at the briefcase. Liam sat beside her, his heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Liam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what you did, it wasn't just brave. It was life-changing." For the first time in a long time, Liam felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the world wasn't as unkind as it seemed, and maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. A new light in the shadows. The briefcase sat open on the kitchen table, like a silent, gleaming monument to possibility. Liam and his mother stared at it, the stacks of neatly bundled cash almost unreal in their pristine perfection. Neither spoke for what felt like an eternity. The air was heavy with the weight of their shared thoughts, their burdens and their dreams suddenly within reach. "Liam," Mrs. Ross finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. This is more money than I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Mom," Liam replied, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "We need this. You need this. We can pay off the rent, the bills, everything." She turned to him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and hesitation. "But why us? Why you? People like Stokes don't just hand out money to strangers." "He said I saved his life," Liam said simply, his gaze dropping to the card still clutched in his hand. Darren Stokes' name glinted in gold under the harsh kitchen light. "Maybe he just wanted to repay me." His mother sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, Liam. I don't want this to come with strings attached. People like him, they don't usually do things out of the kindness of their hearts." "I don't think he's like that," Liam said, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. He seemed genuine. And if he wasn't, then why would he show up here? He didn't have to. Mrs. Ross pressed her lips together, clearly still uneasy, but she didn't argue further. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Well, regardless of why he did it, you made me proud, Liam. Not just for what you did yesterday, but for everything. You're a good kid." Her words warmed Liam's heart, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The day before, he had been just a kid picking up trash by the airport, scraping by to help his mom make ends meet. Now, everything felt different, bigger, brighter, and more uncertain. Later that evening, as the summer sun dipped below the horizon and cast the apartment in warm golden light, Liam sat by the window, staring out at the distant glow of the airport lights. His mind raced with possibilities. What would they do with the money? Pay off their debts. Move to a better neighborhood. Maybe even start fresh somewhere far away from the constant noise of jet engines and the looming threat of eviction. But even as he thought about these things, a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered questions he couldn't ignore. Who had sabotaged the jet? Why? And had they seen him watching? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He turned, surprised. They weren't expecting anyone. His mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. "Who could that be at this hour?" she murmured. Liam followed her as she opened the door, revealing a man in a crisp suit. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and piercing green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wasn't one of Stokes' men, though. Liam was certain of that. "Good evening, Mrs. Ross," the man said, his voice smooth but formal. "My name is Victor Dane. I work with airport security." Mrs. Ross frowned. "Is something wrong?" "I'm here to speak with your son," Victor said, his gaze shifting to Liam. "If you don't mind." Mrs. Ross hesitated, clearly wary, but Liam stepped forward. "It's okay, Mom," he said. "I'll talk to him." She looked between them, her protective instincts flaring, but finally nodded. "All right. I'll be in the kitchen if you need me." Victor stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He didn't sit, instead standing near the window and looking out over the dimly lit street. "You caused quite a stir yesterday, Liam." Liam crossed his arms, his nerves making his heart beat faster. "I just did what anyone would have done." Victor turned, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, not anyone. Most people would have kept their heads down and ignored it. But you spoke up, and thanks to you, we're dealing with a serious security breach." Liam's stomach tightened. "Did you find the guy?" Victor's expression darkened. "Not yet, but we found traces of his work. The tampered landing gear, a tracking device installed in the fuselage, and an encrypted note left in the hangar. Whoever this person is, they were planning something far more dangerous than simple sabotage." Liam blinked, the weight of Victor's words sinking in. "What do you mean?" Victor stepped closer, his voice lowering. The tracking device wasn't just there to monitor the jet's movements. It was linked to a network we're still trying to decipher. If that jet had taken off, it could have led to something catastrophic. Liam's throat went dry. "Like a crash? Or worse," Victor said, his tone grim. "We suspect corporate espionage, but the truth is, we don't know who we're dealing with yet. And that's where you come in." "Me?" Liam's eyes widened. "What can I do?" "You saw the saboteur," Victor said. "You can describe him. Tell us what he looked like, how he moved. Any detail, no matter how small, could help us identify him." Liam hesitated, his mind flashing back to the figure crouched by the jet. The man's dark clothes, his hurried movements, the glint of tools in his hands. He took a deep breath and began to recount everything he remembered, his words tumbling out in a rush. Victor listened intently, nodding as Liam spoke. When he finished, the man placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've been a great help, Liam. If we find him, it'll be because of you." Liam felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly tempered by a flicker of fear. What if he knows I saw him? What if he comes after me? Victor's grip on his shoulder tightened. "You don't need to worry about that. We'll be keeping an eye on you and your family. You're not alone in this." After Victor left, Liam's mom pressed him for details, but he downplayed the conversation, not wanting to worry her. He focused instead on the here and now, the money, the eviction notice, the chance to finally turn things around. That night, as Liam lay in bed staring at the ceiling, sleep eluded him. His mind churned with questions, fears, and the faintest glimmer of excitement. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, like his actions truly mattered. And yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the saboteur wasn't done. That this was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. As the night deepened and shadows filled the room, Liam whispered to himself, "I won't back down. Not now. Not ever." Unbeknownst to him, the wheels of fate were already turning. drawing him further into a world of danger, intrigue, and unexpected opportunity. Shadows closing in. The following morning, the world felt oddly normal. The sun peeked over the horizon, its rays washing the cracked pavement outside with a warm golden hue. The sounds of distant traffic mixed with the occasional chatter of neighbors starting their day. But for Liam, the ordinary sounds of his neighborhood felt surreal, like the calm before a storm. Sitting at the kitchen table, he stared at the briefcase of money. His mother had tried to tuck it away, but Liam insisted it remain in plain sight, perhaps as a reminder that their lives were no longer as desperate as they once were. The eviction notice, now a crumpled ball in the trash, no longer loomed over them like a dark cloud. But the relief was fleeting. Liam knew their problems weren't just financial anymore. His mother bustled around the kitchen, preparing breakfast with more energy than he'd seen in months. "I called Mr. Lopes this morning," she said with a smile. "Told him we'd be paying off the rent today." He nearly choked on his coffee. Liam chuckled, but his laughter felt hollow. "That's great, Mom. One less thing to worry about." She paused, turning to him with a look of concern. "But you're still worrying, aren't you? About that man from last night, Victor?" Liam hesitated, unsure how much to tell her. "Yeah, he said the guy who sabotaged the jet might have been part of something bigger. It's a lot to take in." His mother placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You've already done more than enough, Liam. You don't need to carry the weight of this. Let the authorities handle it." "I know," he said, though the unease in his chest told a different story. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing, not when the memory of the saboteur's tools and hurried movements still haunted him. Not when the thought of what could have happened, what almost happened, kept replaying in his mind. Later that day, Liam decided to head back to the airport. He told his mother he was going to collect cans like usual, though the real reason was far more complicated. He needed to see if anything had changed, if the saboteur had left more clues, or worse, returned. As he approached the airport perimeter, the familiar hum of jet engines filled the air. Workers moved about, their reflective vests glinting in the sunlight. Security was noticeably tighter. Guards patrolled the fences with a vigilance Liam hadn't seen before. He kept his distance, watching from the shade of a tree as they conducted their rounds. Liam's eyes scanned the area, looking for anything out of place. He noticed one of the private hangars had its doors open, revealing the same white jet he'd seen the day before. Workers swarmed around it, inspecting every inch as if searching for more signs of tampering. But something else caught Liam's attention. Across the tarmac, near a row of parked vehicles, a figure lingered in the shadows. The man wore dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He seemed to be watching the hangar, his posture tense and his movements deliberately slow. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Was it the saboteur? He couldn't be sure. But the man's behavior set off alarm bells in his mind. Without thinking, Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He quickly snapped a photo of the man, trying to be discreet. But as the camera's shutter sound echoed faintly, the figure turned, his gaze locking onto Liam like a predator spotting its prey. Liam froze, his breath catching in his throat. The man's face was obscured by the brim of his cap, but the intensity of his stare was unmistakable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a sharp pivot, the man disappeared into the maze of vehicles, his movements quick and purposeful. Panic surged through Liam. He had to tell someone. He pulled out the business card Darren Stokes had given him and dialed the number, his fingers trembling. The call connected after a single ring. "Liam," came Stokes' calm but curious voice. "What's going on?" "I think I just saw the guy," Liam said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "The one who sabotaged your jet. He was near the airport, watching the hangar." "Are you sure it was him?" Stokes asked, his tone sharpening. "I can't be positive, but he looked suspicious. I took a picture. I think he saw me." There was a pause on the other end of the line, And then Stokes spoke with quiet urgency. "Get out of there, Liam. Now. I'll send someone to meet you." "But what if—" "No arguments," Stokes interrupted. "Your safety comes first. Leave now." Liam shoved his phone into his pocket and started walking briskly toward the main road. He resisted the urge to look back, every nerve in his body on high alert. The streets were busier now, filled with the usual hum of afternoon traffic. He tried to blend in, keeping his head down and his pace steady. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave him. Every shadow, every passing face felt like a threat. He quickened his steps, his heart pounding as he turned a corner and spotted a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. The driver's window rolled down, revealing Victor Dane's sharp features. "Get in," Victor said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Liam hesitated for only a second before climbing into the passenger seat. The doors locked automatically, and Victor pulled away from the curb with practiced ease. "Tell me everything," Victor said, his eyes focused on the road. Liam recounted what he'd seen, describing the man's clothing, posture, and the way he'd vanished into the parking area. He handed Victor his phone, showing him the photo he'd taken. Though the image was blurry, the man's silhouette and distinctive cap were clear enough. Victor studied the photo, his jaw tightening. This complicates things. If he was watching the hangar, it means he's not finished. He might be planning another attack. "Why would he come back?" Liam asked. "Wouldn't he know the place is crawling with security?" Victor's expression darkened. "People like him thrive on risk. If he has a bigger plan, a few guards won't scare him off. But now that he's seen you, we have another problem." Liam swallowed hard. "You think he'll come after me?" "It's possible," Victor admitted. "But don't worry, we're not going to let that happen." Victor drove Liam back to his apartment, but instead of leaving, he stationed himself outside in the SUV, keeping watch. Liam's mother was understandably concerned when she saw Victor again, but he reassured her that everything was under control. For the rest of the day, Liam couldn't shake the tension that gripped him. He stayed close to the window, watching the street below for any sign of the man in the cap. His mother tried to distract him with small talk and plans for how to use the money from Stokes, but Liam's thoughts were elsewhere. That night, as the city quieted and darkness blanketed the streets, Liam lay awake in his bed, his mind replaying the events of the day. The man's stare, the urgency in Victor's voice, and the lingering fear that danger was closer than ever. And then, just as sleep began to pull at the edges of his consciousness, he heard it, a faint scraping sound at the window. His eyes snapped open, and his heart leaped into his throat. He sat up slowly, his gaze fixed on the shadows outside. The scraping came again, this time louder, accompanied by the faintest whisper of movement. Someone was out there. A visitor in the shadows. The sound at the window sent a cold rush through Liam's veins. His body froze, his breaths shallow and quick. The faint scraping came again, steady and deliberate, like nails against glass. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting faint shadows on the walls, but it wasn't enough to see what, or who, was outside. Liam's pulse pounded in his ears as he slipped out of bed, his bare feet pressing soundlessly against the worn wooden floor. The apartment was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic outside. His mother's soft snores drifted from her room, a reminder that she was completely unaware of the potential danger lurking just a few feet away. Taking a deep breath, Liam crept toward the window. His heart thudded louder with every step, each one feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the edge of the curtain, he hesitated, his hand trembling as it hovered near the fabric. The scraping had stopped, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Steeling himself, Liam yanked the curtain aside, his eyes darting to the window. At first, he saw nothing, just the faint reflection of his own wide-eyed face in the glass. But then, in the faint glow of the streetlight, he caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow shifted just beyond the frame, And then a face appeared, half obscured by the brim of a baseball cap. Liam's blood ran cold as he recognized the man from the airport, his sharp eyes locking onto Liam's through the thin pane of glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. The man's expression was unreadable, but the intensity of his gaze was enough to make Liam take an involuntary step back. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, chief among them. What does he want? And how did he find me? The man raised a hand, placing his palm flat against the glass. It was a strange gesture, neither threatening nor reassuring. But it sent a clear message. I know you're here. Liam's instincts kicked in. He spun around and bolted for the living room, his heart hammering as he fumbled for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed Victor's number, praying the man was still parked outside. The call connected after a single ring. Liam? Victor's voice was sharp, alert. He's here, Liam whispered urgently. The guy from the airport. He's at my window. I'm on my way up, Victor replied without hesitation. The line went dead. Liam clutched the phone tightly, his eyes darting toward the hallway leading to his mother's room. He wanted to wake her, to warn her, but fear kept him rooted in place. What if the man heard? What if he tried to get inside? A loud knock on the apartment door shattered the silence, making Liam jump. His first instinct was panic. He's inside already. But then he heard Victor's calm but firm voice. Liam, it's me. Open the door. Liam ran to the door, unlocking it in a rush. Victor stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the small space with a sense of authority. He was dressed in his usual sharp suit, but his demeanor was anything but casual. His hand rested on the grip of a holstered weapon at his hip, and his eyes swept the room with practiced efficiency. Where did you see him? Victor asked, his tone low. At my window, Liam replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He was just standing there, watching me. Victor nodded, moving quickly toward the window. He peered outside, his movements deliberate and precise. After a moment, he turned back to Liam, his expression grim. He's gone, Victor said, but that doesn't mean he's far. What does he want? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Why is he here? Victor's jaw tightened. If I had to guess, he's trying to send a message. He knows you saw him, and he wants to scare you into silence. Liam's stomach churned at the thought. I'm not going to stay quiet, he said, his voice firmer than he felt. Victor placed a reassuring hand on Liam's shoulder. Good. But this changes things. If he's willing to come here, it means he's desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. We'll need to take extra precautions. Victor spent the next hour securing the apartment. He checked every window, every lock, and every potential point of entry, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Meanwhile, Liam's mother had woken up, her concern growing with every passing minute. What's going on? She asked, her voice laced with worry. Who's this man you're talking about? Victor hesitated, glancing at Liam. It's complicated, Liam said, stepping in. But someone dangerous knows I saw him at the airport. Victor's just making sure we're safe. Mrs. Ross' face paled. Dangerous? Liam, why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to worry you, Liam admitted. But I'm fine, Mom. Victor's here. We'll be okay. Her eyes filled with unshed tears, but she nodded, pulling Liam into a tight hug. You're my world, Liam. Please don't do anything reckless. I won't, Liam promised, though he wasn't sure he could keep it. As dawn approached, Victor finally deemed the apartment secure. I'll be staying nearby, he said. If anything happens, call me immediately. What about the man? Liam asked. How do we stop him? We're working on it, Victor replied. But right now, our priority is keeping you safe. Liam nodded, though the words offered little comfort. The saboteur wasn't just a shadowy figure anymore. He was a very real, very immediate threat. And no matter how much Victor reassured him, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the man wasn't done. As the first light of morning crept through the windows, Liam sat on the edge of his bed, his mind racing. The events of the past few days had turned his life upside down, and the path ahead felt darker than ever. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, one thought stood out. I won't let him win. Not now. Not ever. Into the lion's den. The morning sun did little to ease the tension that hung heavy in the air. Liam barely touched his breakfast, his thoughts consumed by the shadowy figure at his window and the danger he now faced. His mother had tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but even she couldn't mask the worry in her eyes. Victor had left just before dawn, promising to return if anything seemed amiss. He assured them the apartment was secure and that additional security measures would be in place soon. But no amount of locks or cameras could dispel the gnawing fear in Liam's chest. As the day wore on, Liam found himself pacing the small living room, the events of the past few days replaying in his mind. The airport, the jet, the saboteur. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite put together. And then there was the question he couldn't shake. Why him? Why had the saboteur targeted him, a kid with no power or influence? Unable to sit idle, Liam reached for the business card Darren Stokes had given him. The sleek black card shimmered slightly in the light, the golden lettering practically daring him to reach out. With a deep breath, he dialed the number, his fingers trembling slightly as he pressed the call button. The line connected after a single ring. Liam, came Stokes' calm voice, as if he'd been expecting the call. What can I do for you? I need to know more, Liam said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. About the man who sabotaged your jet. About why he's coming after me. There was a pause, and then Stokes sighed. Meet me at my office. I'll have someone pick you up. An hour later, a sleek black car pulled up in front of Liam's apartment. Victor was behind the wheel, his expression as sharp and unreadable as ever. Ready? He asked as Liam climbed into the passenger seat. As ready as I'll ever be, Liam replied, though his stomach churned with unease. The drive to Stokes' headquarters was smooth but tense. The city blurred past the windows, a chaotic mix of towering skyscrapers and bustling streets. Liam kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, his mind racing with questions. Who was the saboteur? What did he want? And how deep did this rabbit hole go? When they arrived at the towering glass building that housed Stokes' empire, Liam felt a surge of apprehension. The building loomed above him like a fortress, its mirrored surface reflecting the world below. Victor led him inside, bypassing security with a quick flash of a badge. The lobby was a sleek, modern expanse of marble and steel, its polished surfaces gleaming under the bright lights. Stokes was waiting for them in a private conference room on the top floor. The billionaire stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city skyline. He turned as they entered, offering Liam a small but genuine smile. Liam, Stokes said, his tone warm. Thank you for coming. Liam nodded, his palms slick with sweat. You said you'd tell me everything. Stokes gestured for him to sit. I will. But I need you to understand something first. What you've gotten yourself involved in is bigger than you realize. Stokes began by explaining the scope of his company's operations. He wasn't just a tech mogul. His business dealt with cutting-edge aerospace technology, advanced AI systems, and proprietary innovations that could change the world. The jet Liam had saved was no ordinary plane. It was a prototype equipped with experimental technology worth billions. The saboteur wasn't just targeting me, Stokes said, his expression grave. He was targeting what I represent, a threat to certain powerful entities who don't want to see my innovations succeed. Liam frowned. You mean competitors? Competitors, governments, shadow organizations, Stokes replied. Take your pick. The point is, the man you saw isn't working alone. He's part of a larger network, one that operates in the shadows and stops at nothing to achieve its goals. Victor stepped in, his voice low and steady. The tracking device we found on the jet was linked to a known cybercriminal syndicate. They specialize in sabotage, theft, and, when necessary, eliminating threats. Liam's chest tightened. And you think I'm a threat to them? Victor nodded. You saw his face. You alerted security before he could complete his mission. In their eyes, that makes you a liability. Liam swallowed hard, the weight of their words sinking in. So what do we do? How do we stop them? Stokes leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto Liam's. You've already taken the first step by coming to me. Now, we need to take the fight to them. Stokes and Victor laid out a plan, a risky but calculated move to draw the saboteur and his associates out of hiding. Using the jet as bait, they would stage a high-profile demonstration of Stokes' latest technology, ensuring the event was heavily publicized. The goal was to lure the syndicate into making a move, giving Stokes' security team the opportunity to apprehend them. You'll be safe, Victor assured Liam. We'll have eyes on you at all times, but we may need your help if things go sideways. My help? Liam asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. I'm just a kid. What can I do? Stokes smiled faintly. You've already proven you have a sharp eye and quick instincts. That's more than most adults can say. If you're willing to trust us, we can use that to our advantage. Liam hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought of his mother, of the life they'd fought so hard to hold on to, and of the saboteur's face at his window. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of his resolve, but so was something else, determination. I'll do it, he said finally, his voice steady. Whatever it takes to stop them. Stokes nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Good. Then let's get to work. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Stokes' team worked tirelessly to coordinate the demonstration, ensuring every detail was meticulously planned. Meanwhile, Liam underwent a crash course in situational awareness and basic self-defense, courtesy of Victor. You're not going to be fighting anyone, Victor said during one of their sessions, his tone firm. But you need to know how to protect yourself if things go south. Liam nodded, his muscles aching from the drills. Despite the exhaustion, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. The day of the demonstration arrived faster than Liam expected. The event was held at a sprawling airfield on the outskirts of the city, the same one where everything had started. Journalists, tech enthusiasts, and industry insiders filled the stands, their excitement palpable as they awaited the unveiling of Stokes' latest innovation. Liam stood with Victor near the edge of the crowd, his eyes scanning the sea of faces for anything suspicious. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, every movement and sound amplified by his heightened senses. And then, just as Stokes took the stage to begin his presentation, Liam saw him, the man in the baseball cap. He was moving through the crowd with purpose, his eyes fixed on the stage. Victor, Liam whispered urgently. He's here. Victor's gaze followed Liam's, his expression hardening. Stay close to me, he said, his hand moving to his earpiece. We've got him in sight. Let's move. As the security team closed in, the man suddenly stopped, his head snapping in Liam's direction. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, the man bolted, disappearing into the chaos of the crowd. Victor cursed under his breath, his hand gripping Liam's arm. Stay with me, he ordered. This isn't over. And Liam knew, deep in his gut, that the real fight was only just beginning. The hunt begins. The crowd erupted into chaos as the man in the baseball cap darted through the throngs of people, his movements swift and calculated. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as Victor tightened his grip on his arm, pulling him toward a safer position near the edge of the crowd. The once controlled demonstration had turned into a whirlwind of confusion and tension. Keep your head down, Victor instructed, his voice steady but urgent. He spoke into his earpiece, issuing commands. Suspect is on the move. Lock down the exits. Do not let him leave the premises. Liam crouched behind a low barrier, his eyes darting toward the stage where Darren Stokes had halted his presentation. The billionaire stood calmly, his sharp gaze scanning the commotion. He didn't panic. Instead, he seemed to be calculating his next move. Is he going to get away? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Victor shook his head, his focus unbroken. Not if we can help it. But this guy isn't working alone. He's got an escape plan, and we need to figure out what it is. Through the din of the crowd, Liam spotted the saboteur weaving through the maze of people. He was heading toward the far side of the airfield, where several hangars stood like silent sentinels. Liam tugged at Victor's sleeve, pointing toward the man. There, Liam said. He's heading for the hangars. Victor nodded, relaying the information to his team. Unit 2, move to intercept at the east hangars. Suspect may be heading for a vehicle or secondary transport. Liam watched as several security personnel broke off from the crowd, moving swiftly toward the hangars. But something gnawed at him. The saboteur's movements were too deliberate, too confident. He wasn't running blindly. He knew exactly where he was going. What if this is a trap? Liam asked, the thought striking him like a bolt of lightning. Victor paused, his jaw tightening. It could be. That's why you're staying here. No way, Liam shot back, his voice firm despite the fear curling in his stomach. If he's setting a trap, you're going to need me. I know what he looks like, and I know how he moves. Let me help. Victor hesitated, clearly torn. But before he could respond, a crackling voice came through his earpiece. Suspect is in Hangar 3. Repeat, suspect is in Hangar 3. We've got movement inside. Victor cursed under his breath, then turned to Liam. Fine, but you stay behind me and you do exactly as I say. No heroics. Got it. Got it, Liam said, nodding quickly. The two of them moved quickly, cutting through the crowd and making their way toward the hangars. The air was thick with tension, every shadow and movement amplified by the weight of what was at stake. When they reached the hangar, they found two security personnel stationed outside, their expressions tense. Status, Victor demanded. One of the guards gestured toward the large metal doors. We've got him cornered inside, but he hasn't made a move yet. No sign of backup, but we're staying alert. Victor nodded, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon. Keep the perimeter secure. No one gets in or out without my say-so. He turned to Liam, his expression serious. Stay close and stay quiet. If things go south, you run. Understood. Understood, Liam whispered, though his nerves were screaming at him to do the exact opposite of running. Victor pushed open the side door to the hangar, the metal creaking loudly in the silence. The interior was dimly lit, the shadows stretching long across the concrete floor. Stacks of crates and equipment lined the walls, creating a labyrinth of hiding places. Somewhere in the maze of metal and machinery, the saboteur was waiting. As they stepped inside, Liam's senses went into overdrive. Every creak of the floor, every faint rustle of movement seemed magnified. Victor moved ahead of him, his steps silent and deliberate, his weapon drawn and ready. Liam's eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of the man who had upended his life. And then he saw it, a faint glint of metal, just beyond a stack of crates. His breath caught in his throat as he pointed silently to the spot. Victor nodded, signaling for Liam to stay put. He moved forward cautiously, his weapon trained on the area. But just as he rounded the corner, a sudden burst of movement exploded from the shadows. The saboteur lunged, a crowbar in hand, swinging it with deadly precision. Victor dodged the blow, his reflexes razor-sharp. He countered with a swift kick, sending the man stumbling back. But the saboteur recovered quickly, retreating deeper into the hangar with a speed that belied his bulky frame. "Stop!" Victor shouted, his voice echoing through the space. But the man didn't stop. Instead, he knocked over a stack of crates, creating a barrier between himself and his pursuers. Liam's heart raced as he watched the chase unfold. He knew he should stay where he was, but something about the saboteur's movements caught his attention. The man wasn't just running. He was heading toward something. Liam's eyes darted toward the far end of the hangar, where a small utility vehicle sat parked near an open back door. The pieces clicked into place in his mind. The man wasn't trying to escape on foot. He had a getaway plan. "Victor," Liam shouted, pointing toward the vehicle. "He's heading for the back." Victor cursed under his breath, realizing the same thing. "Cut him off." He barked into his earpiece, directing the security team to intercept. But as the saboteur neared the vehicle, he pulled something from his pocket. A small device with blinking lights. Liam's stomach dropped as he recognized it from the descriptions Victor had given him. A remote detonator. "He's got a bomb," Liam yelled, his voice breaking with panic. The saboteur turned, his face twisted in a cruel grin as he raised the device. "You think you've won," he sneered, his voice echoing through the hangar. "You have no idea what's coming." Victor fired, the shot ringing out like thunder. The saboteur's hand jerked, the detonator falling from his grip as he crumpled to the ground. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Liam's ragged breathing. Victor approached the man cautiously, his weapon still trained on him. The saboteur was alive but badly wounded, his face contorted in pain. "You're done," Victor said coldly. "Tell us who you're working for." The man laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. "You're too late," he rasped. "This is bigger than you, bigger than all of you." And then, before Victor could stop him, the saboteur pulled a second device from his jacket. A bright flash filled the hangar, and Liam's vision blurred as he stumbled back, the world spinning around him. When the light faded, the saboteur was gone. The back door of the hangar stood open, the utility vehicle missing. Victor swore loudly, slamming his fist against the nearest crate. Liam staggered to his feet, his ears ringing. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. "He escaped," Victor said through gritted teeth, "but not for long." As the weight of what had just happened settled over him, Liam felt a surge of determination. The saboteur might have gotten away, but the fight was far from over. And for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. "I'm not giving up," Liam said, his voice steady despite the fear still gnawing at him. "Not until we stop them." Victor looked at him, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Good," he said, "because this is just the beginning. A reckoning in the shadows." The chaos of the hangar slowly gave way to a grim quiet as Victor and his team regrouped. The saboteur's escape had left a bitter taste in the air, but the fight wasn't over. It couldn't be. Liam stood near the door, his fists clenched at his sides, every muscle in his body tense. His mind was racing. The saboteur had slipped through their fingers, but they had a lead now, something to follow. And Liam wasn't about to let it go. Victor spoke into his earpiece, barking orders to the rest of the team. "Lock down the airfield. I want every road, every access point monitored." He couldn't have gotten far. Liam took a step closer, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "He said this was bigger than us. What did he mean by that?" Victor's expression darkened, but he didn't look surprised. "He's part of something larger. We've suspected it for a while, but this confirms it. The syndicate isn't just after Stokes. They're targeting the technology he's developing, and they'll do whatever it takes to destroy it." Darren Stokes entered the hangar, his presence commanding as always. Despite the chaos outside, he looked calm, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. "What's the situation?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "The saboteur escaped," Victor admitted, "but we've got a trail. He left behind the detonator and some equipment. We're running an analysis now." Stokes nodded, his jaw tightening. "Good, but we can't afford to wait. Every minute he's out there, he's a threat." Liam stepped forward, his gaze locked on Stokes. "He mentioned something was coming, something bigger. Do you know what he's talking about? Stokes hesitated, then motioned for Victor and Liam to follow him. They moved to a secure room at the far end of the hangar, away from prying ears. Once inside, Stokes leaned against the metal table, his expression grim. "There's something you need to know," he began. The jet he sabotaged wasn't just a prototype. It was carrying classified technology, a new form of AI designed to revolutionize global communication and defense. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. Liam's heart sank. "You think they're after the eye?" "I don't think," Stokes said. "I know. And if they'd gone to these lengths already, they won't stop now." Victor's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen, his brows furrowing. "We've got something," he said, holding the device up for Stokes to see. The tech team traced the detonator's signal. It was broadcasting to a remote location about 20 miles from here. Stokes straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Is it still active?" "Barely," Victor replied. "But we can follow the trail." Liam spoke up, his voice firm. "Then let's go." Victor turned to him, his expression stern. "You've already done more than enough, Liam. This isn't your fight." "It is now," Liam countered, his jaw set. "You said it yourself. I've seen him. I know how he moves. If he's out there, I can help you find him." Stokes studied Liam for a moment, then nodded. "He's right. He's already involved. Keeping him here won't make him any safer." Victor sighed, relenting. "Fine, but you follow my lead, and you don't take any unnecessary risks." "Understood." "Understood," Liam said, his voice resolute. The drive to the remote location was tense. The landscape shifted from urban sprawl to quiet countryside, the dense trees and winding roads creating an eerie sense of isolation. Liam sat in the back of Victor's SUV, his mind replaying the events of the past few days. Every step had led to this moment, and he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was waiting for them would change everything. The signal led them to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of a small town. The building loomed in the distance, its broken windows and rusted exterior giving it a foreboding appearance. Victor pulled the SUV to a stop a few hundred yards away, cutting the engine. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The signal's coming from inside." Stokes, who had arrived in a separate vehicle, joined them at the edge of the property. He carried a sleek black briefcase, its purpose unclear but clearly important. "This place looks like it's been abandoned for years," Stokes said, his sharp eyes scanning the perimeter. "Perfect cover." Victor motioned for the team to fan out. "We go in quiet. No unnecessary noise. Liam, stay close to me." The group moved cautiously toward the factory, their footsteps muffled by the overgrown grass. As they approached, Liam's nerves buzzed with anticipation. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he pushed the fear aside. There was no turning back now. Inside, the factory was a maze of crumbling walls and rusted machinery. The air was heavy with the scent of oil and decay, and the faint hum of electronics echoed in the distance. Liam stayed close to Victor, his eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. They followed the signal deeper into the building, eventually reaching a large central room. The space was dimly lit, illuminated only by the glow of several monitors set up on a makeshift workstation. A laptop sat in the center of the setup, its screen displaying a series of complex codes. Victor signaled for the team to hold their positions. "It's a control hub," he murmured. "They've been coordinating from here." Stokes moved toward the laptop, his briefcase still in hand. "If we can access their network, we might be able to trace their entire operation." But before he could reach the workstation, a voice echoed through the room. "You're too late." The saboteur stepped out from the shadows, his face partially obscured by a black mask. He held a small device in his hand, its blinking light a clear warning. "You think you've won?" The man sneered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Victor raised his weapon, his voice cold. "Drop the detonator, now." The saboteur laughed, a harsh, grating sound. This isn't just about Stokes' little toy. This is about control, power, and you can't stop it. In a split second, the saboteur pressed the detonator. A loud hum filled the air as the monitors began to overload, sparks flying from the equipment. "Shut it down," Victor shouted, but Liam's eyes were locked on the saboteur, who was already retreating toward a hidden exit. Without thinking, Liam broke into a sprint, his legs carrying him faster than he thought possible. He dodged falling debris and leaped over machinery, his focus narrowing on the fleeing man. "Liam," Victor's voice called behind him, but he didn't stop. Liam caught up to the saboteur in a narrow hallway, tackling him to the ground. The man fought back, his strength overwhelming, but Liam held on, refusing to let him escape. "You're done," Liam shouted, his voice raw. The saboteur twisted, managing to throw Liam off balance. He rose to his feet, glaring down at the boy. "You should have stayed out of this, kid." Before he could strike, Victor appeared, his weapon drawn. Not another move. The saboteur froze, his gaze flicking between Victor and Liam. Slowly, he raised his hands in surrender, his sneer replaced by a grim resignation. Back at the control hub, Stokes and his team managed to shut down the detonator's signal, preventing further damage. The saboteur was taken into custody, his cryptic warnings about a larger conspiracy lingering in the air. As they left the factory, Liam felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The immediate danger was over, but the fight wasn't. There were still questions to answer, still threats to face. But for the first time, Liam felt ready. Victor clapped a hand on his shoulder as they walked toward the waiting vehicles. "You did good, kid. Better than good." Liam nodded, a small smile breaking through his tired expression. "We stopped him. That's all that matters." Stokes approached, his sharp gaze softened with gratitude. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, Liam. If you ever need anything at all, you know where to find me." As they drove back to the city, the weight of everything that had happened began to settle. But Liam knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same boy who had stood at the airport fence, watching jets take off and dreaming of something bigger. He was part of something bigger now, and he wasn't afraid to face it.